Hi, Richard here. So, today we have a little bit of a longer video for you because I want to explain something very important in English, and it is the conditionals. So, I'll try and not take too long, but I do want to give you a good explanation of these. Now, conditionals are generally used with if and when. Today we're going to focus on if because it's easier to explain. And they're used when one action or result is dependent on another. Now, we have 4 conditionals in English. Now, they seem very difficult at first, but really, I'm going to show you today they are quite easy and they do make sense. So, let's go straight into our first conditional. It's actually not called the first conditional. It's actually called the zero conditional. Now, let's have a look at an example, or 2 examples. Number 1, if water reaches 100 degrees Celsius, it boils. Number 2, if you eat too much, you get fat. Now, the zero conditional is used to deal with things that are always true. So, if water reaches 100 degrees C, it boils. It's the same today, it was the same yesterday, it will be the same tomorrow, it's the same in France, it's the same in Mexico, it's the same in Japan, okay? If you eat too much, you get fat. It's the same for you, it's the same for me, it's the same for everybody, apart from my one friend who can just eat everything and still looks great all the time. We all have a friend like that, but generally it's true for everybody. And the construction of the zero conditional is really easy as well. It's if plus present simple, present simple. So if water boils, if water reaches, it boils. If you eat too much, you get. So it's just present simple, present simple. So nice and easy. Let's have a look at our second one. The second one is called the first conditional, or it might be easier to think of it as future conditional 1. Think of it like there are 2 conditionals in the future. So the first conditional, future conditional 1. Now, this is something we use when we want to talk about a future action. But let me give you an example first. Number 1, if I have the money at the end of the month, I'll buy some new trainers. And number 2, if I have the time this evening, I'll call my sister. So the construction of this is nice and easy. If plus present simple, future simple. If I have the money, I'll buy. If I have the time, I'll call. If it's sunny tomorrow, I'll go to the park. So present simple, future simple. But when do we use this? Well, we use it for future actions that are either realistic or possible or probable. So, for example, if I have the money at the end of the month, I'll buy some new trainers. Well, how much does a pair of new trainers cost? 100 euros? Probably I have 100 euros at the end of the month because I usually have 100 euros at the end of the month available. If I have the time, I'll call my sister this evening. Well, how long does that take? 20 minutes? 30 minutes? Normally, I have 20 or 30 minutes free in the evening. So, realistic actions, realistic future actions, possible future actions, or probable future actions. So, nice and easy. Let's look at the next one though, because like I mentioned, there are 2 conditionals when we talk about the future. And the next one is called the second conditional. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of this. Number 1, if I had the money, I'd buy a Ferrari. And number 2, if I had the time, I'd learn to play the violin. This is used for future actions that are unrealistic, improbable, impossible, maybe impossible now as well. So, like we talked about, if I have the money, I'll buy some new trainers at the end of the month because it's 100 euros and it's realistic. If I had the money, I'd buy a Ferrari. Well, that's A, impossible now, B, probably not very realistic or very probable in the future either. Our second example on the first conditional talks about if I have the time this evening, I'll call my sister because it takes 20 minutes or 30 minutes. If I had the time, I'd learn to play the violin, because learning the violin takes about 2,000 hours of practice, and I just don't have 2,000 hours of practice time in my life at the moment. I'm too busy, I work a lot, I make videos, all these kind of things, so I just don't have the time. So it's not that it's an impossible action. Anybody can learn to play the violin, but it's impossible now, which is the problem. So that's why we use the second conditional for it. We can also use a second conditional in a different way, but first I want to explain the construction of the second conditional. So it's really easy. It's if plus past simple, would plus present simple. So if I had, I would buy. If I had the time, I'd learn. Something like that. So if plus past simple, would plus present simple. But like I said, there's actually one more usage we can use of the second conditional that is very useful. And we can use it to give advice, because we have this very famous structure. If I were you, I would action. So imagine if a friend of mine, he really doesn't like his job and he doesn't like his boss, he's not very motivated. Maybe I would say to him, if I were you, I would start looking for a new job, or I would quit my job. Probably start looking for a new job before you quit the job, right? So if I were you, I'd start looking for a new job. Remember, I would, but we can also shorten it, I''d, I'd. So it's just a little bit easier to say. So as we can see, there are two conditionals when we're talking about future actions. You just need to ask yourself, is it realistic, probable, possible? If it is, it's the first conditional. If it's not, it's the second conditional. Let's have a look at our last conditional now. And our last conditional is called the third conditional. Or we could call it the past conditional. Now, the past conditional, the third conditional, it talks about events in the past, and it thinks about the effects of those events. So what about this for a scenario? Imagine, last month I had an exam, I had a language exam, and I failed the exam because I didn't study. And now, 1 month later, I think, what a shame, I had such a good opportunity and I missed that opportunity. So I might say something like, if I'd studied more, I would have passed the exam. If I had studied more, I would have passed the exam. Because in reality, I didn't study very hard, I didn't pass the exam. But if I had studied more, we would have a different result, wouldn't we? Let's look at another example. If the Titanic hadn't hit an iceberg, it would have landed in New York. So as we know, the Titanic was heading to New York. It hit an iceberg, we all know because we all watched the film, or the documentary or whatever. Everybody knows this, so that was the plan. We all know it hit an iceberg, it didn't land in New York. But if it hadn't hit the iceberg, that would have been a different result, wouldn't it? Now, the construction of the past conditional is maybe the most complicated one, but you can learn it. I have confidence in you. It's if plus past perfect, so had plus past participle. If I had studied, would plus present perfect. So if plus past perfect, would plus present perfect, have plus past participle. Now, there are some other conditionals we can go through, and they're called mixed conditionals. Things like where we talk about a past action and its effect now. We're not going to talk about that today because we're coming up to the 10-minute mark and I want to wrap this up before 10 minutes. So I will make a separate video about that in the future. So make sure you keep checking the page. Make sure you click subscribe as well, and then you don't need to keep checking the page. You just get an update when a new video drops. So I hope that helps. Really, your focus now should be learn those conditionals, get those 4 conditionals right. It's just one more hurdle in English you will have crossed, and a little bit of progress, like we talked about in different lessons, a little bit of progress every day. That's what we're aiming for. So I hope that helps. Have a great day. Thanks.